everyone has access to education and learning. So those are initiatives that are important to that company. Do those things align with you? Okay, so let's move on to the second point. The position. So will you have the opportunity for a promotion? Questions that you can ask the HR director or hiring manager when you are in talks around a role. So information you want to gather ahead of time. What do opportunities for promotion look like for you to a next level, to maybe a managerial role or something like that? You want to have a clear understanding of what you want in this new space and how do you get there, and have that be broken down clearly for you, so you have that, so you know where you go from day one, from the start. And then also think about the management style at the specific company. I know at Amazon, we have a large amount of ownership and autonomy within our roles. I worked in operations before I came over to the recruiting team, and I can say that without a shadow of a doubt, I was able to close a gap where I saw one, write an SOP, talk to my team, and cascade it out. Some of my friends that have moved on to other companies have said that, you know, their company does not allow them that same level of ownership, or they don't work at the same pace, right? Pace is something you want to consider. There's fast pace in operations. Some companies work at a faster pace than others. So definitely something you want to think about. Intellectual stimulation and opportunities for promotion go hand in hand. You want to make sure that you're learning and growing. That way, you know, if you're applying for roles in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, that your skills haven't atrophied, that you're putting all those into use, and you are going to be much better at the end of 4 years than when you started. Considering travel requirements. So do you have to go to a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting? Do you have to go to see clients regularly? All things that you want to figure out if they fit into your lifestyle and if they're going to work logistically for you. And then job title. That one is a big ticket one. Your job title just kind of signifies your stature, and you want it to make sense when folks look at your resume. You either, if it's not, you want to see an upward trajectory within your job titles and your job roles. That's an ideal situation. Or you want to be able to see that the scale and the scope and the complexity of work that you've had as you've moved on to roles have just like increased. That's what you want. So you want to ensure that the title makes sense for your career path. And that's just super vital moving forward to other roles. And year-over-year reflection of how you're doing. And then we want to think about what training looks like for that job and how that training is going to be imparted when you start. So are you going to have, is it going to be Zoom classes or self-paced? Will you have someone on the team that you'll be paired up with, the buddy, onboarding buddy that will help you work through some of your initial questions? Ask all of those questions up front because you want to know what to expect should you accept an offer, and do those things align for you? And you'll hear me say that a lot. It's that we understand that we interviewed you and you're interviewing us, and gathering all this information gives you a really great idea of what you want to do when you get that offer. So moving on to point number 3, the location, big ticket item to consider. So the cost of labor is different depending on where you live. Your salary, meaning your salary will look different if you live in Seattle versus if you live in Alabama or a small town in Texas, like I used to live in a couple years ago. So salary is impacted by your location. It's also impacted by how you perform during your interview. You want to consider the cost of living in the town that you're in. So if you move from Texas to Seattle, the cost of living is going to be higher. What do bills look like? And what does rent look like in Seattle? What do things look like? Is the salary going to make sense? Is it going to, are you going to get the increase that you're looking for? All things you want to think about. Diversity of population, entertainment, commute times and costs for commuting. All points to consider: safety. I dropped a NerdWallet link and then a link for SafeWise, just for some extra information for you to have. Use those resources to go look at specific areas that interest you to see if it's worth it for you. And then consider relocation assistance. So if you are moving to a different city, is the company going to cover it? Amazon, more often than not, may cover relocation, but it's a question you should ask so that you get that clarity. Figure out if it's a yes or no. Moving across country can be costly. So is that money coming out of your pocket or coming out, or is the company going to assist you with that? Sometimes you have to fly out to a location initially to find apartments or houses. There's property management to be considered and things like that. Are those things addressed in your contract, right? That you get, that offer contract. And Jackie will talk a little bit more about that a little later on in our presentation, but things you should think about. So what I would do, I would take all these points, and if you have multiple offers, if you're so lucky to have 2-3 offers or something like that, put them side by side and work through cost of living in town A, town B, town C, and go through cost of labor, go through, do I have to commute for this job? Is this job in office? Is it hybrid? Things like that. This one is offering relocation assistance of this amount, and this one is not offering relocation at all. What does that look like at the end? Bottom line, what comes out of my pocket? What does the company help me with? So things you should do when you're thinking about a new role. When I first started recruiting, I talked to a candidate who was fresh out of college, and the job that I helped him get was his very, very, very first professional gig. And he had no idea about taxes and the impact that taxes take out of your paycheck and how it impacts your take-home pay. And I laugh right now, it was a hilarious conversation, but things you should track on depending on the city that you move to. Sometimes taxes are higher depending on the city and the state that you live in. So you want to think about that ahead of time and how it's going to impact you and your family. So let's move on to number 4. We're going to talk about benefits. Companies are different. Smaller companies offer different benefits. So you want to get clarity around what's offered, when it kicks in. Are you going to be able to put your entire family on your insurance and your healthcare? Things like that, things to consider. And everyone's situation is different. So we want to think about, is there a flexible work schedule? Do they offer life insurance? Do they offer mental health benefits or any kind of disability insurance? What is their dental, vision, retirement planning, matching, and things like that? So, as we get older and things like that, we want to make sure that some of these things are in place so that we can take better care of ourselves. Jackie's going to go into detail about total compensation, but you want to have an understanding of what your salary growth potential is. Oftentimes, I think when we are wanting to negotiate salary, we want to know what the very top number of that budget is. And the truth is, in many cases, you might not hit that top number because you need room in there so that you can make those increases on a yearly basis moving forward. In some cases, you may be able to hit that number. We don't know. You negotiate though. You always ask, you never know what you're going to get. You want to think about, are there bonuses or commissions that are going to be offered for the role? And what are your key performance indicators to earn those things? Let that be clear and clearly stated up front. And I'll say again, do your research. So your recruiter or the HR director or the hiring manager that's talking to you about a specific role from any company, it's not their responsibility to say, hey, here's the best package possible, or here's the right number. You need to understand what the right number is. You need to take stock of your education, your years of experience, all the extra work and time that you've put into learning specific topics, and consider what you are worth and what the market value is for that role. And when you're having conversations, you want to come in strong with your justification for what you think you should earn, X number of dollars, right? Your recruiters will do well by you, but you should be informed about what the ranges for that specific role and come with a number in mind. Be open to conversation, but I would encourage you to do your research. So talk to friends, talk to coworkers, or talk to family members who have more experience in interviewing and in employment, somebody you trust. And if you need help navigating and figuring out how to find out some of those numbers. And lastly, we'll move forward to our next slide. Well, here's some good responses for you. So many times you'll get the question from a recruiter, what are your salary expectations for your next role, or something along those lines, right? And you want to have a prepared answer for them. You may come back and just say openly what your salary is or what you expect, and you give a range, or you can say this: thank you for considering me for the position. While I'm excited about the opportunity, I prefer to learn more about the responsibilities and requirements of the role before discussing specific compensation. Could you please provide me with a salary range or budget for the position? This will help me better understand if it aligns with my expectations. So if you don't feel comfortable providing a number, you can use this template and send it on to your recruiter or HR or anyone that you're talking to regarding offers, just to get a better understanding of what the role is and just, understanding what that budget is. Or you could use response number 2. I appreciate your interest in my application. To ensure our compensation expectations are aligned, I would like to gather more information about the role, right? You want to get as much information about scope and responsibilities, what benefits are offered, get all that information up front, and then you can provide your range. This conversation looks different based on how much experience you have negotiating offers, right? So maybe this is your first job or second job and you've never negotiated anything. Well, let's take a step back, take a beat, and let's think about it. Let's get prepared ahead of time. Let's have cool templates like this to use if you need them. Just leverage it if you need to, and then have honest conversations with your recruiter and move forward feeling like you have a strong command of what's happening with the role that you're moving forward in. So lastly, we'll talk about equity and budget. So many companies offer prospective employees equity as part of their compensation package. Amazon absolutely does. And Jackie will go into specifics around what our total compensation is comprised of. It means that you have ownership within the company, and you'll see that as RSUs listed, restricted stock units listed on your offer document. So it's important for you to consider that too, because you can negotiate everything, right? You'll have a little wiggle room to negotiate, and Jackie would be the one that you would negotiate with on our team. So things to consider. And then budget. It is absolutely critical for you to assess whether you can afford to accept a job. So like I said, put it down on a piece of paper. If you're an Excel person, put it in Excel. All the considerations, what's going to go out, what's going to come from your pocket, what's coming from the company, and how they will assist you moving forward. Is the cost of living higher in a specific city than where you're coming from, or vice versa? You want to make sure that it makes sense for you, your family, for your life, for your trajectory, for your career. Moving to a new city is a big deal if you're relocating. So I want to make sure you're happy, that you're comfortable, that it makes sense, and that it will align and you can move into your new role comfortably. So I'll hand over to Jackie, and she will discuss some of the other points on offers.
All right. Thank you, Priscilla. Yes. So I think kind of the overarching theme that we're trying to convey today is just that we advise people to do their research, and everyone's situation is going to look different. What's important to Priscilla versus what's important to me could be different. Even though we work at Amazon, we work essentially on the same team. Our priorities as far as what would get us to accept a job offer can look different. And so we really encourage people to take the time to figure out what's important to you. And with all those different factors that Priscilla mentioned, figure out what's important to you and what are kind of the things that you need to consider. So we're going to dive into just a little bit more about total compensation. I'll give just a little bit of insight to what total compensation looks like at Amazon, but just know this is like a sample. Obviously, every company is going to have a different structure, but I would say first off, typical piece for any compensation package is going to be base salary. So this could come in the form of a set base salary where you're saying, okay, I make 70,000 a year and that's divided equally over 12 months. And sometimes we also consider base salary to be an hourly rate, which is just essentially broken out into an hourly pay structure instead of like a set dollar amount. So for some positions, hourly could mean that you have the option for overtime. Sometimes at Amazon, it just means that even though we don't offer overtime, someone's still set at an hourly rate. So, but in general, we look at that as kind of the base pay. This is what you can expect to see on. For Amazon, it's typically a monthly cadence. Some companies have like biweekly pay schedules or even weekly. It just depends on the individual company. So that would be kind of the first piece, typically a fixed dollar amount that you're going to expect to see on a regular cadence with whatever your pay schedule looks like. For Amazon then specifically, the next piece of our compensation structure and what an offer would look like could be sign-on payments. So we call these a payment versus a bonus because a bonus is typically incentive based. A payment for us is just a set dollar amount that we're using to help supplement your total compensation. So for us, typically these are payments that are broken out over the span of like your first and second year included with your base salary. So a lot of people just kind of lump that in together. But for whatever company you may be receiving an offer from, it's important to understand if they're offering you a sign-on payment or sign-on bonus, what does the structure look like? Is it something that you're receiving in a lump sum, or is it something that you're receiving over a period of time? That's something that you can factor in to decide, does this monetarily make sense for me based on what the pay structure and schedule is going to look like for this? For Amazon, the other key piece that we typically see with offers is restricted stock units. We, from the beginning of our company's creation, have put a heavy emphasis on restricted stock units as a large portion of our offer. And that's for several reasons. The main one being that we want our employees to feel like they have ownership and really like a stake in our company. And so by providing them with restricted stock units, they literally do have ownership. For Amazon, our restricted stock units are on a 4-year vesting cycle. And as you complete each year of employment with us, a portion of your shares will vest, meaning they become yours. You're the owner and you can decide what you'd like to do with them, whether it be cash them out for whatever the value is at that time, or let them sit in your account and continue to grow. So one thing to consider here, if the offer that you're receiving has restricted stock units, is to understand more about what is the vesting cycle for that particular company. Not everyone company abides by the same vesting cycle or percentage that we have at Amazon. So it's important to understand when your shares are vesting and when you'd actually be able to see the value of those restricted stock units. So some other pieces that could be part of an offer and total compensation that we don't typically see at Amazon, but depending on the company or position that you're in are some things you might see. And that could be additional bonuses that are based on either team or individual or even company performance. And sometimes that could be like a percentage of your base salary. So let's say your company met a specific sales goal. So everyone's going to get a 10% bonus based on the success that the company had. You could also see commission for certain roles, particularly sales roles in particular, are receiving like commission based on sales that they make. So those are all items that you're going to want to understand for your offer of maybe you're getting like an initial package with the base salary, stock and sign-on payments, but then clarifying, is there opportunity for me to get commission based on the role that I'm in or bonuses based on the role that I'm in? So these can be very individually dependent based on the type of role that you're going into or company that you're joining as well. So there's a lot of different possible questions that you can ask your recruiter. And when I say recruiter, this can also mean the hiring manager, the HR partner, whoever it might be that you're working with on the offer. Like at Amazon, we hire in larger volumes. So we do have dedicated recruiting teams, but some companies that are smaller might not necessarily have that luxury. So you might be working directly with the hiring manager on an offer or these questions, or an HR partner as well. But just know that the word recruiter can be interchangeable with whoever you're working with for the offer. So these are a variety of questions that you might want to consider. And again, This is just to give you some ideas of things you could be thinking about or should be thinking about based on your personal circumstances. I would say these are common questions that I see from candidates as well. That's kind of where we generated some of this information, because these are questions that we often see. We very often get asked, what is a salary range for this position? It's a completely reasonable question for you to ask as a candidate, because as Priscilla kind of mentioned earlier, it's important for you to know, like, financially, what does compensation need to look like in order for you to accept an offer. So it's certainly reasonable to ask that information even before you get to the offer point, to understand that this is something that's worth pursuing for you as well. I will say oftentimes companies will not provide a specific number. I will say there are states that do have laws now that require a company to post information and share salary range information, so that we're providing pay transparency for the positions that we have posted. That is state specific, so it depends on where you live. Like Washington State does have one. So you'll see, like, on our positions, there's a base salary range listed there. Just my guidance for people that are looking at those job postings that do have a pay range is typically they're only required to post the base salary range, but keep in mind that doesn't necessarily take into consideration the other factors of an offer that could be sign-on, cash payments, or restricted stock units as well. So it's just really a starting point for you to have an idea of what the base salary could look like. It's important to know what benefits are offered as well. This could be a variety of things like actual health or medical benefits, like vacation or paid time off or sick time. Essentially, you can determine what are the benefits that are most important to you, and understand what's included in the offer, but also what's the timing of those things being offered. For some companies, for example, medical benefits might be offered starting on your first day, or there might be a waiting period. We have to wait 30 or 60 days to be able to enroll. So depending on your situation, again, might be important for you to determine what are those kind of important factors for you and how that will impact your decision. It's important to know, like, if you are going to be relocating for a position, as we talked about, is relocation assistance involved? And is there any sort of, excuse me, any sort of cash, like sign-on payment to assist with the relocation portion? Our advice is to read the fine print that come along with these documents. Oftentimes, especially when you're seeing relocation assistance, there is some sort of clause that says you will stay a certain amount of time, or else you'll be asked to pay back a certain portion of your relocation. And so I strongly encourage candidates that are either getting relocation or even sign-on payments or cash like that, read the fine print of your offer letter and the relocation documents to understand what you might be responsible for should you choose to leave within a certain time frame. That's very company dependent, but again, I think it's important for people to be aware, read through all the documents that they're receiving to know, like, what they're responsible for, should things change for you in the future. Other questions you can ask are, again, we talked about this, but what's the vesting cycle or schedule for your stock options? As I mentioned, we have a 4-year vesting cycle at Amazon, but other companies operate in a different schedule. So it's important to clarify what that looks like for you. If retirement matching is important to you, clarifying what sort of matching percentages does the company offer, or any additional retirement savings benefits as well. And it's also perhaps important to research the termination agreement. So perhaps, again, like I mentioned, will you be required to repay any of the relocation assistance that you received, or any like cash sign-on payments that were fronted up to you at the beginning of your employment or with your offer letter? So that way you're fully in the know of any sort of responsibilities you might have in the future should you choose to leave within a certain time frame. So some best practices that we typically suggest, I think it's really helpful to build a relationship with your recruiter and the person or hiring manager or HR partner that you're going to be working with, because this really, I think, allows you to feel more comfortable having negotiation conversations with them, which can be difficult conversations. So start with small talk, get to know each other. For me as a recruiter, I feel like I do when I have more relationship with a candidate, it does make our offer process smoother because we've already kind of discussed what's important. And I understand from the candidate, what are they looking for? What's most important to them? So I can help drive that conversation faster for them. So taking the time to get to know people, whether it's phone call or even just via email, is really helpful to kind of start to build that relationship. As we've mentioned several times before, we're going to keep drilling it home. Know what your deal breakers are and deal makers are ahead of time. So doing that research upfront and understanding what's most important to you, what are the must-haves for you versus the nice-to-haves, knowing like what's that dollar amount that you must have versus what's your nice to have. I want to get to this point, but here's what I could realistically accept. Those are all some really important things for you to know. And it's good to have that information kind of solidified and thought about before you get to the offer stage so that you're not having to like rush through yourself and making a decision. You've already kind of clarified and thought through what are the important things for you. And now you're just comparing the offer that you're being given to these things that you've already determined are important for you. And then our next piece would be just to be candid and upfront. I think this can be a really challenging thing to do for people because oftentimes offer conversations and negotiations can be very awkward for people, especially if it's not something that you've done before. And I understand it can be really challenging to get on the phone with someone to talk about this versus email is a lot easier to put your thoughts down and then just let someone, process the information later. But I would strongly encourage candidates to get on the phone. One, it just helps your time frame move quicker, especially if you're deciding between multiple offers or have a time frame that you have to make a decision. Getting on the phone can typically help alleviate that faster. But also, I think it shows the kind of seriousness that you're taking in making a decision. And from my perspective as a recruiter, the more information I can get from a candidate, the better I can prepare an offer for them. My goal is for you as a candidate to be happy with the offer that we're providing, and I want to meet your expectations as much as possible. So the more that information a candidate can provide about what they're looking for, the better for me as well to be able to do exactly what you're looking for or try to get to that point. So again, asking information about what is the budget for this role or kind of what the salary ranges might be, and the recruiter or hiring manager, HR partner will share as much as they can. And just be very clear with what's important to you in this position as well. And it could be some of the points that Priscilla talked about as well, like what are the growth opportunities for this role? Am I having to go into the office for this position? Am I expected to travel once a month? Understanding, what those things are, and be honest about what's realistic for you. If you're saying, no, I can't travel based on set circumstances, it's good to be upfront with that sort of information at the front end of the process. All right, so kind of diving into the negotiating your offer. So at this point, you have received an initial offer, you're reviewing the details that have been shared with you, and perhaps it's not what you were looking for. And typically, I would say this is from a compensation perspective, is where people aren't necessarily satisfied with what was provided. Our advice is always to remain as professional as possible for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think being nice to people definitely gets you further in a lot of aspects of life than being mean or insulting or anyone. So I think negotiating, but respectfully and professionally is really important. Using data to support why you're asking for a particular salary. And we've have a few examples to share. So I'll dive into that as far as like, what can you actually say to show that you've got like the right experience to warrant this. And I encourage candidates to be flexible and open to alternatives. I can give an example for Amazon in particular. It's common that Amazon does not meet or exceed a candidate's base salary expectations. And that is because our offer structure puts such a heavy emphasis on the restricted stock units. We use that as a large portion of our total compensation package. So because of that, our base salaries tend to be lower than what someone's looking for. So when I'm working with a candidate and they're saying, well, I'm asking for a base salary of this, and I tell them, well, I can't meet that number from a base salary perspective, but would you be open to additional compensation in your sign-on payments or additional restricted stock units that could help make up the difference there? So I would say obviously have, what's most important to you, but also be open to hearing what are some alternatives or some ways that you can kind of meet in the middle or compromise on what it is that you're looking for and what the company can realistically provide as well. And again, it's important to consider the other benefits that might be offered here as well, besides just compensation. So we also, again, will reiterate that like doing your research and knowing what's happening in the industry is helpful as well. Priscilla mentioned like several tools and websites that are out there that you can take a look at to see what are others saying about these types of roles and kind of the trends we're seeing there. One caveat I will add to some websites like Glassdoor, other things like that, is keep in mind that it's typically individuals that are posting the information, not necessarily a company. So I would kind of take it with a grain of salt as far as like the accuracy of the information, but it's always a great starting point to get a general idea of other sentiment about the company, compensation information, and things like that. It's always helpful to be prepared, especially if you're going to be going into a conversation with a recruiter, let's say, to negotiate your offer. Kind of think through and have these talking points ready when you get on the phone with them, and be confident, like we said, professional, but also there to get your point across. But no, like having that confidence of saying, here's what I'm looking for and here's why I need that. Again, while still being respectful and nice, I think gets people a long ways throughout the process. But just being a good person is always like a nice thing to have when you're talking with someone as well. We typically would suggest avoiding an ultimatum type of situation, saying like, well, I have to have this, or I'm not going to join, or while you might be feeling that internally, it's also okay to express like this from my perspective as a candidate, this is what I need to feel comfortable in taking this role and moving into this new direction in my career path. So I'd probably phrase it more like that versus like a really hard stop. And you don't necessarily have to share that information with an employer to say, like, I have to have this or else. You can just give your final decision at the end to say, like, I'm choosing not to join. So, and again, we suggested schedule a time to talk on the phone because I think that's the best way to get your point across there. So a few examples we have to share here of just a sample email. So let's say you got an offer that was below like what you were looking for. This is just essentially a template that you could use to describe kind of your qualifications and what you're looking for to be able to accept this offer, essentially. A second example here is, let's say that you received another offer from another company, but let's say company number one is your first choice. Sometimes you can use your second offer as kind of leverage to be able to get a similar or higher offer from your number one choice. Now, my advice in these situations is for people to be truthful. If you're providing this as a reason for why you're looking to receive like higher compensation, just know some companies might ask for proof to see like the offer letter from this other company or other offer that you got. So just keep in mind that that's something that they might ask for as well to make sure that they're matching that offer properly. But sometimes this can be a good negotiating tactic. And I would say, especially for those where they're getting competing offers from a very similar company or what the company would deem as a competing company to them. This is kind of a useful way at times for candidates to be able to use that leverage to help them get what they're looking for out of the offer. So our final piece here, just going to be talking about accepting or declining the offer. So at this point, you have essentially gone through the whole process, evaluated the offer, maybe you negotiated a bit as well, and they were able to provide you with a counter offer or updated offer there, and you're ready to make your final decision. So obviously take the time that you need to review all the documents that have been provided to you. Ensure that you have an understanding of when you are required to make a decision and know what the date is that you need to provide that decision. If you have any questions regarding some of the documents that might be provided, or you're expected to sign like a non-disclosure or non-compete agreement, or like we said, separation or termination agreements, typically we advise that you seek legal counsel for those types of questions. Usually a company is not going, that's providing you an offer is not going to provide like legal counsel on those documents. So if someone has questions about those, then we typically suggest they consult like a personal lawyer to answer any legal questions they might have there. We always suggest that you communicate your decision with the recruiter in a timely manner. So just making sure you're keeping the recruiter up to date with what's happening. Perhaps you have other outstanding interviews you're trying to finish as well, so you can make a decision based on any possible offers you're getting. Just let the recruiter know you need an extension for a day or two to be able to make your decision. The communication part is key. I think people are more likely to be flexible and work with you if you're providing updates on kind of what's happening in your personal circumstances. If you are going to be declining the offer, it's really helpful from a recruiter's perspective if you can just provide any sort of explanation or information as to why you're deciding not to move forward. I will say oftentimes as a recruiter, we know why you're not accepting, especially if it was a compensation related piece, but it's always helpful for the recruiting team to have any idea as to what's happening. If there's anything that we can be doing to make the experience better in the future, we want to know about that. So providing any sort of explanation or feedback is really helpful, and just thanking them for their time and the opportunity. You never know where this situation or opportunity could lead you in the future. So I always advise people, like, don't burn your bridges. It's always good to like leave everything on a good note. Just appreciate the time, provide contact information to stay in touch in the future, because you never know when you might come in contact with that person again to potentially like revisit another role in the future at that company. All right. So if we're accepting the offer, some things to think about, asking what are the next steps from here? If there's any sort of formal documentation that you need to sign, maybe virtually, what is the mandatory steps you need to complete prior to your first day, perhaps a background check, any sort of certification or drug test, perhaps depending on the role. So just ensuring that you're clear on what are the expectations of what you need to complete prior to your first day, understanding what is your actual start date. Do you need to be picking up any equipment like a laptop or anything for your position? Is there a place you're supposed to be on the first day? So essentially clarifying any of those details. It's always important to, and helpful to keep in touch with your recruiter and maintain that relationship, recruiter, hiring manager, whoever might be kind of walking you through the onboarding steps to the first day to ensure that you've completed on the steps and you're able to start with your designated start date. So I will just take a pause and get us to the Q&A, and that's all that we wanted to cover, but happy just to open it up to any questions that we might have. I'm just looking at the chat now. I see leave the ultimatums for reality TV. Yeah.
Right. You don't want to disqualify yourself and have your recruiter think that, well, this is it. Well, they're done, and then they just disqualify you from the process and go to the next candidate. So
Yes.
if you just lay out that ultimatum, that's the position you may put yourself in. So you want to be mindful of that up front and keep yourself in the run and drive a hard bargain, but just like real fine line.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think from my perspective, sometimes like when we are unable to meet a candidate's compensation expectations, I try to explain to a candidate like why we're building the offer that we're building. And I will say, like, perhaps not every company will provide that level of detail, but we're typically pretty transparent here to say, like, I want someone to have the long-term growth opportunity for compensation increases in the future. So sometimes if we're maxing you out right at the top of what your range is for that position and you're not able to see any increases in the future, that's not a good selling point for you as a candidate to want to stay in the future because you can't see any compensation increases as well. So I think it's fair when we talked about like asking what the ranges are when you get your offer, asking like, where is this offer at within the range for this position? Like, is there opportunity for compensation growth in the future as well? And consider that, and asking also like, is there, if there's opportunity for growth from a professional perspective, like let's say I'm getting promoted to the next position, then what does compensation look like that for you there? So lots of things to consider, but again, determining what's most important to you is kind of the first step, I would say.
It seems like we may have a question. I'll have that user type it out for right now.
Sure.
But my personal question for y'all has been, do you have like a personal like story that really, like a moment in your own careers that highlighted like these tips as well? Like,
yes. When I got my first job offer, I had never negotiated. I had no clue what to do. I'm like, that's a lot of documents. I didn't read through all this fine print. Like, so I'm like pouring over, and I'm that person that reads every single thing. You know, like when you like go to get a rental truck or something like that, like they give you like the long sheet, and it's like I read all the things. So I was sitting like reading every single document, and I remember I called a friend and I said, hey, I need some help in order to negotiate this situation. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've read everything. Am I understanding this correctly? And I went through, a couple of things, and they were like, yes, okay, here's, what this means, here's what that means. And does this work for you? And like, we went through the whole, here's what I'll say when I talk to the recruiter. Like, we did like a little role play on the phone, and it was really cool because it helped me get prepared. So, you talk to your friends, use your resources, have, someone that's important to you in your life who you trust kind of walk you through some of these scenarios and just help you get prepared.
no, and I totally agree with you on that one too. It's funny, especially I do the same thing with all my friends, especially during this time where everyone's offboarding. I'm like, look at your severance packages, look at these new offer letter practices, look at the non-competes. You gotta go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, or you're gonna end up accepting some weird clause. Like one of my friends was like a startup, a sign-on offer, realized that he had to stay at that startup for 4 years. And he didn't stay at that startup for 4 years. The initial sign-on plus the reload plus a percentage of interest determined by HR would have to be paid back to the company. I'm like, you signed this when? Oh, yeah. And I was like, Washington State now has a couple of new laws coming in.
Yeah.
And now non-competes are going to start being a weird, we'll start to see all these new laws coming in. But we have a question that says, if you accept an offer, accept the position, take the job, then find out they will not be paying you for holidays or vacation, is there anything you can do?
My initial answer is probably no. Well, so first off, I would always try to clarify that from the beginning, like what usually in their benefits they might list like we offer paid vacation or excuse me, paid holidays or paid vacation for these set days or whatnot like that. If you've already accepted the offer and then find this out, I think you could possibly go to like if there's any HR support and figure out what their advice might be or any suggestions they might have. I think if it's unfortunately like a company policy, then there might not be a whole lot you could do. You could always, I think, consider like contacting a lawyer to get their thoughts and have to share like whatever legal documents that you have received with this information. But I think that would probably be my general advice.
Yeah. You know what? Every offer isn't your offer. And although it may seem exciting, you may just have to turn it down because it doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for your family. It doesn't work for your situation. It just doesn't work for your career trajectory. Turn it down and find the one that fits. And that's just the honest decision. So you have to feel comfortable going in, ask the questions up front. After you accept the offer, it's hard to go back after you say yes and then try to negotiate again, right? So yeah, ask the questions up front, do the legwork, and then when you say yes, then you know that you're going in strong and you feel good about it.
Yeah, I would agree. It's highly unlikely that a company would negotiate with you after you accept the offer.
A bonus question from a different vertical has been asked. is it okay or how to ask for more time when you are negotiating for an offer? Is there a more polite way, even though a recruiter has put like a hard, like you got 72 hours on this offer?
Yeah, I can give you my perspective. I would say yes. Uh, there's a polite way to ask for sure. I think like putting an email saying, "Hi, I know you've set I saw that you set a date of June 9th to respond to this. I would kindly like to ask for an extension on my offer decision timeline to this date. Specify the date that you want to be extended to." Um, if you can provide reason, if you can
Keep
provide
going.
reasoning, yeah, as to why you'd like an extension, I think that you're more likely to get one. My suggestion for people always is to be honest. Like, if my candidates are asking for an extension and they're saying because I'm interviewing with another company and I want to be able to make a decision based on all the information that I have at that time, while it's like not my favorite thing because I want someone to take our offer versus someone else, I also want to respect like someone's personal circumstances. So I would say companies and recruiters likely handle that on a case by case basis. The worst that someone could say is no, we have to have a decision within this time frame or we're going to move forward and your offer will no longer be valid. But it's always worth an ask. And I would say, especially if you have personal circumstances, we often understand like that, you know, life happens and sometimes an emergency takes place and you're like, I can't mentally make this decision right now because I'm dealing with this personal emergency. You don't necessarily need to go into the details of everything that's happening, but just a brief description of like, I can't make this decision right now. Can I please get an extension is helpful. So it's always worth an ask. And then a company will kind of decide from there what is realistic. And like I said, some might be flexible and some might say, no, we have a hard deadline. So always worth an ask though.
Always. And then I want to be mindful of y'all's times in case you have a hard stop right now too. We are approaching the beginning of the hour. I'll allow 2 more minutes for questions to flood in, and then if not, we'll wrap and we'll call it a day. I appreciate y'all coming, the vibe. For those of y'all, please fill out our poll, which is, I'm gonna launch it right now. It's the feedback. It's a small little question for those of y'all that are liking this session. As we know, feedback is a gift and makes the world revolve. I'm not sure if I got that from the Amazon principles. But I definitely know I've seen that somewhere within the house of Amazon.
Sounds like it.
Yes. On my own, because I want to take advantage of y'all being here too. What are your initial thoughts on how when offers get rescinded and how to like deal with that? Like, you know, she's beauty, she's great, she's Miss United States, like positive attitude on that part.
So as in like you got an offer and the company had to take it back? Yeah, that's a really hard situation for anyone. I mean, frankly, like it's not fun for the company or especially the recruiter that's having to have that conversation. It's extremely difficult. I'm gonna safely assume that most often than not, it's because there have been significant changes in the business. So I think people need to understand that it's often not personal, and often what it could be doing is saving you time, like saving you the experience of potentially starting and then getting laid off in a month or two, which would obviously not be ideal as well. My suggestion for people would be to like use that experience to your advantage. Like you just spent time interviewing, you were able to get an offer. That shows that a company felt like you had the right skill set. So you can utilize that experience to hopefully like snowball you into other opportunities as well. Yeah, I think trying to just keep as positive as an attitude as possible towards it is best to keep yourself moving forward. But yeah, I mean, not gonna lie, it's really challenging and difficult for everyone. And especially where we went through several months of seeing that pretty regularly for different companies, it's extremely challenging.
Oh yeah, very much so. And the world, we're seeing the tech industry change in front of our eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to be mindful that we're being recorded and we're on YouTube. If not, this would be a completely different session for us to be like, hey, how do y'all feel about the Seattle market right now? And like you mentioned it earlier in your presentation, let's jump back.
Yeah, things are interesting. I'll be excited to see where the rest of this year goes for just the job market in general.
Mm-hmm. No, same. Well, it seems like we had a couple people participate in our polling. Thank you so much for that. For those of y'all that haven't, if not, let's give a round of applause virtually and remotely and from home to our AWS speakers who came in and did an excellent job doing this. We always appreciate y'all for partnering with us. And if there's any students we can connect you with, is there anywhere we can connect with you online or virtually? I think.
Yeah, find us on LinkedIn. I think if you just search our names, but if I go back to the beginning, our pages are there. But yeah, feel free to follow up. Oh, it's gonna take me forever to get back there, but just search our names on LinkedIn. You'll find us there.
Yes,
Yeah,
and then if
absolutely.
your company has when's your pop-in period? When do you have the roles open? When do you have when's your come to us time in a way?
Yeah, I mean, any roles that we have open are posted right now on our
Mhm.
site, amazon.jobs. So feel free to peruse. And that's not just like Priscilla and I are specifically support AWS security, but any roles that Amazon has open are going to be posted on amazon.jobs. So feel free to peruse there and apply to jobs that you're interested in. Essentially, a recruiter or manager will review your resume and profile, and then you'll be contacted directly if they'd like to move forward. But yeah, feel free to connect with us. Here's our information here. You can just search our names and our photos and stuff will pop up. But amazon.jobs will be the best place to see anything that we have available right now.
And I did not mean to cut you off, Priscilla, at all. Before you jumped in, I realized I just kind of jumped the gun.
Oh, no, absolutely fine. We're on LinkedIn. I link the jobs that I support on my profile. So you should be able to find me and find those roles specifically. And if those don't work, we'll see if I can kind of like direct you to a different team. But we're happy to connect with you and just to grow our networks and just share knowledge.
So for the folks at home, that definitely means connect to Priscilla. Recruiting makes the world go round. Trust. So if Priscilla's dropping that dose in your LinkedIn feed for you and blessing your feed every morning, you better be on it and be like, okay, I see you. Let me slide in the little messages real quick and say, hey, I saw you just posted this E4 role in the middle of Amsterdam or the middle of nowhere. I want to join. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's refer a friend. Let's talk about that.
Yes.
If the role doesn't fit for you, refer a friend. It always helps just to push somebody forward who's interested, who you feel like may be a good fit also. But human kindness, just do the thing.
And you do that too. If Priscilla gets that bonus, or you know somebody at Amazon that gets that bonus, make them buy you a coffee. Trust me, if you can help boost someone's number, be like, I helped you close 3 of those roles. I got you.
From Starbucks.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to end the conference. Feel free to watch the feedback on youtube.com/minorities in cybersecurity. And we will see y'all next Expirer session when our next topic shows up to the newsletter. Thank you so much.